This is David Bohner with ShowUpNation, and we come together with a new guest here today, Nick Bohner. Nick and I got to know each other about 2-3 years ago, and I think he represents a lot of entrepreneurial youth and where the success of where one wants to go when they're young and the challenges of that success, and also the challenges of showing up with the challenges of success. And a little bit about the background. You started working when you're very younger.
Yeah,
11 years old. You're 24 today, currently.
Yes, sir.
And so, anyways, if you like this kind of content, it's going to take the help of the group of us, the nation, everybody, to push this content and encourage it towards others so that we can make a difference in this world. With that, we'll get started. So, Nick, a little bit of background. I understand your dad, he's a little bit different than you. He's a education personnel. He goes through and he teaches in agriculture school, professor.
Yep.
That's not the route you took.
No, definitely not.
So tell me the journey. What could push you 11 years old, and your challenges maybe last a little bit, and a little bit what that experience has been like.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me. So my family, yes, my dad, he works for the government. He's the soybean expert for Ontario. So, he went to school for all that, went to university, got his degree. My uncles, though, are all entrepreneurs. And so I definitely believe it's in the blood to some degree.
Right.
And so for me, it was never even a question. Like, yeah, as a kid, I always loved heavy equipment, just being around it. And I always knew I wanted to do something related to machinery. And it was never a question of, do I want to work for somebody? Do I want to get a job? No. I wouldn't say there was some great plan or strategy or anything. I just knew I wanted to do my own thing, and I didn't want to answer to anybody. So, yeah, to start, I began knocking on neighbors' doors, drumming up some business. And
what were you doing?
Snow removal. So,
snow removal.
Started with, my dad's little walk-behind snowblower, banging on neighbors' doors, and slowly built that up a little bit. And I think it was 3 years in is where I met my first mentor, a guy named Paul Vanderzon from Montreal. And he taught me that there was a business.
How'd you meet him?
At a trade show, Landscape Ontario show. And I had talked to him online a little bit before that, but that's when we first met.
Oh. And what age was that?
14, I think.
14 years old. Wow.
And so what I got from Paul was he taught me that there was a residential snow removal model in Quebec that nobody was doing in Ontario, or Western Ontario, but there was a little bit in Ottawa, but it doesn't really matter. And, involved these tractors with something called an inverted snowblower and mass volume, hundreds of driveways per tractor, tight routes. There was a whole strategy behind it, and there were huge companies, companies servicing 10,000 driveways or whatever. And so I saw a real opportunity in that because, in my area, I'm from Stratford, Ontario, all the landscapers and everybody who was doing residential snow removal didn't care about it. It was a little bit of extra income. The quality of service was not there. It was just not a strategic, well set up business model.
There's no systems in it.
There was no systems. There was nothing, right? It was plow trucks making a mess, ripping up people's lawns. They had, a handful of driveways all across the city, no strategy, no proper routes, nothing like that. And so I started advertising like they do in Quebec and started building that up. And it grew quite quickly, doubling year over year, sometimes more than that. And so that went on from, 14 to, I would say, probably 2 years ago is when I kind of hit my market cap, I guess you could say. We had about 3,000 driveways. And problem is I got a little cocky, though, and I got used to that rate of growth, and everything kind of went my way the whole time. And, you're obviously working hard and trying to grow the business and whatever. But I think there were a lot of business lessons that I thought I knew at the time that I didn't actually know. And so, I got myself in some pretty serious financial trouble last winter. Too much overhead, trying to expand like crazy. And I was forced to sell the business, which, in a lot of ways has been good, actually. I'm very happy to be out of that business and on to the next thing. But a serious challenge, no doubt. It was a pretty life-changing experience for me, to be sure.
So I'm curious, what was, just on a broader scheme, what was the things that you weren't watching out for? And could you have avoided it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say that, so with that specific business model, one of the advantages to it is you get all your money up front. You're selling seasonal packages. And so that's great when you're growing. You get, you bring in $1.5 million or whatever, and then that's what gets you through the winter. And you can grow off that. You can advertise, you can add equipment, you can do all this stuff. But I got very used to cash flow not being a problem at all. Like,
Right.
I never really watched it. My accounting was pretty shoddy. Bookkeeping wasn't really, like, we were doing it. I had it delegated out. But I got kind of addicted to delegating and creating systems. Sure, they were systems, but not great ones.
Right.
And not watching those systems properly.
Right.
So, yeah, I would say the biggest mistake I made was just not watching the numbers, not watching the expenses like I should have.
So you weren't involved enough in the details, despite a lot of people telling you, hey, learn how to delegate.
Yeah.
But you've done that without managing what you're delegating.
100%. 100%.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so you reached out to me in a kind of a low moment there back a couple of years ago. And I told you at the time, I said, every entrepreneur is a hairbreadth away from craziness, and not to worry and get up and go again. Was that good advice, or where were you at the time?
It really was. So yeah, that was sort of I would say a parallel thing, but yeah, when I think the first phone call we had was like a 5-hour, 6-hour conversation. It was a long call, because yeah, I was sort of losing my mind at the time, actually, and I didn't know what it was, but
looking back to, what was it?
I went to the mental hospital for a week, so I got technically diagnosed bipolar, which I think is fairly legitimate, as far as I had definitely all the symptoms.
Sure.
But yeah, that was a very strange experience, in that I was, kind of losing touch with reality, and I didn't really know it. And I think some of that might have been brought on with business stress and whatever, but also, some of us are just predisposed to stuff.
But you're living the high life a bit, and you didn't really feel like you could have been touched and that kind of stuff, right? And so it's hard to stay connected. I think a lot of times when you're in growth and things are always changing, you don't even know where there's a foundation.
Yep.
Right? You're not clear about what that foundation would look like. Right? And I think we lose that sometimes. If that's not clear on a lot of levels, right?
Right.
And we put a lot of too much focus on one area, right? I kind of break it down to family, faith, fitness, and finance, right? So, we can double up or double focus on finance, and we ignore these other areas like faith, like fitness, like our health, right? And so do you think that was part of it that lost you the foundation, that you was areas of your life that you weren't focusing enough to create a foundation for yourself?
No question. No question.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think especially as a Christian, if you get, at the time, I was probably consuming too much, influencer type content, aspirational stuff. You see all these guys, getting money online in relatively easy ways. Supposedly,
yes.
Allegedly, right? And you're watching like whatever, Ema and Gadzi and all these. Turns out they're all a bunch of course sellers, by the way. I should add that. We could go off on that, but anyway, that definitely I would say had a negative impact on my mindset. Right. And I was making money. I was doing fairly well, whatever. But that, at that age, early, 21, 22, that you think you're not cocky at the time. You think you're relatively. No, I was very arrogant. No question. Right. No question.
And so what happened maybe in that sense, that money came to you, quote unquote, maybe fairly easy?
Yeah, it seemed to.
At that point in time? Yeah. And then the idea was, why is there a limit maybe?
Yes.
Like if I can do this, then Joe's doing this, and there's no reason why I can't do what Joe's doing.
Exactly. Well, and also that very aggressive, risk tolerant mindset, that is what got me to the place I was at. Because, everybody else was being super conservative, saving a bunch of money, whatever. I'm just like, we got money. We're throwing it all on advertising. Buy 10 more tractors. Hire all more people, right?
Right.
And it was working. And so my strategy actually was paying off. But you can get high on your own supply. And there's a limit to that. You have to be grounded in reality, too.
You weren't actually measuring the results of your purchases and your investments and that kind of stuff in details to know where to buy, where to sell, and all that kind of stuff, and how much, and measuring all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really interesting. So, I went with you to, what was it? Was it convention?
We went to
church convention. What was it called?
The one we just went
Yeah,
to?
yeah.
Cross conference.
Cross conference. And what I notice about you that's kind of unique is that you have an ability to diverse your education. You spend a lot of time reading. Like, there was a lot of stuff you learned about even preachers out there, and a lot of stuff in depth in the Bible and that kind of stuff. Was that always there?
Yeah, I think I've always been interested in a variety of random topics.
So do you read a lot?
Yeah.
Is
I
it
listen
audio?
to mostly
Mostly
listen.
audio?
Mostly
Okay.
listen, yeah.
Right.
For sure. And my mom's an author, so that's I have
really?
some, that's in my blood a bit too,
Oh, wow.
I guess.
Oh, wow. So is that thing you think came naturally to you, or just because your parents are kind of that way and they're professors and authors and that kind of stuff?
Yeah,
Is that
I think that's absolutely another just sort of genetic element.
Okay.
I think I've always been curious about random things. And so, no, none of that was really intentional. It's just, I don't know, I'm a Christian, so I thought I should probably know something about my theology. And my theology, for example, does differ from my parents. Like, I'd be pretty aligned with our church now, but that's a bit different than what my parents believe.
And does your parents open to that? Like,
yeah,
they do that?
Yeah,
That's all good?
They're awesome.
They kind of appreciate the fact that you kind of figure things out on your own?
They're solid. Very good.
Yeah,
very
interesting.
Good, yeah.
And so that's a culture that's encouraged.
Yeah, I would say so.
I would say so,
yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. So now, as you went through that struggle, right? So you went through the struggle financially. You've kind of spent quite a bit of time on your faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel balanced out in your viewpoints on family and then your fitness and that kind of stuff? You're categorized at all? Do they kind of balance out for you now?
No, I think there's. I like I like that the 4S. I think that's legit, but I also think there's seasons of life, and you have to prioritize things at different times. So right now, as I'm sort of rebuilding my business, that definitely is taking that takes most of my time. That is taking priority. I didn't really mention that before, but along the journey of the snow business, I got into this other industry, blower truck business, and I won't bore you with I won't bore you with the details on that. But a business that I thought there was a bigger future in, more potential, liked it even more, enjoyed the work even more, higher barrier of entry, all kinds of upsides. But it did take a fair bit of money to get into, so that was another factor in my snow problems. But all I have to say, now I have a much smaller company that does, a lot more revenue per employee, we can say. So sort of a simpler, more condensed business, manageable.
Yeah.
But it does require, I don't have a manager for it anymore. So I'm quoting stuff. I'm out here. I'm driving around every day, which I personally actually enjoy a lot. I find I'm happiest when working. But no, that's kind of where I'm at right now. So to your question, no, right now it's finances are pretty paramount, and faith. I think faith has to stay with you your whole life. It's easy to give lip service to and harder to actually achieve. But I think as a Christian, that should always be underlying.
And what makes you think what makes you unique in this learning the lessons and the journeys of life versus other people maybe your same age? What's happened different in your life, and why did you choose maybe quote unquote the more difficult journey?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just time, in that I started super early, and so I've learned some hard lessons fairly early too. But as far as what specifically do you mean by that?
Well, the thing is that you've applied yourself more than most people your age.
Right.
Applied yourself.
Sure.
So what has pushed you to apply yourself like you have?
That's
people don't have in it.
That's a good question, and I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I do believe there are certain traits that are just innate. Genetic. We all have different interests, different things like that. And so for me, it's never been. I mean, I think I have developed some level of discipline and things like that, but that's never been the front and foremost thing. I didn't get into a business I didn't enjoy and wasn't excited about and didn't care about. Didn't start some internet marketing company that I have no interest in and just grinded it out on my laptop all day. It wasn't like that at all. I wanted to be running equipment. I wanted to be doing this stuff. And so it's hard to track some of that down, to be honest. I don't know if I have a great answer. I think a lot of it's just innate and comes with intuition, kind of following my gut.
So where would you classify between mentorship and reading? What's been more important to you in your life?
Mentorship by far.
Why is that?
So one of my main mentors that I've known him since I was 16. He just died in the fall, JR. But all I have to say, I talked to him, probably almost every week from 16 till now. And he was like a total prick, actually. He was like a real I'd call him with some idea, be like, what the hell are you thinking with that? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. He'd see something I post on the internet. What are you talking about flexing this? Dude, like, he would just go off on me. But at the end of the
Why'd
day,
you keep on going back when he's doing such a
because I knew the whole time he had my best intentions at heart.
What made you believe that?
He gave very, very good advice that helped me a lot. And whenever he was being a prick, he was always guiding me back towards reality and back towards where I needed to be. And he just invested the time. Why are you going to talk to me all the time if you don't like me?
But get it. So, but why would that not affect you? Or did it? The fact that he was being a prick.
No, I maybe overstated that a little bit.
No,
I think
but some people might get bothered and they not call a guy back up again.
Right. No, I just never cared because he was so much farther ahead of me. He was, he was about your age.
Yeah.
Doing, I don't know, 25, 30 million a year in the same industry I was in. He started, about the same age, same trajectory, and he had already not skipped so many steps. He had already gone through so many hard points, almost gone bankrupt many times. And he was trying to steer me away from those pitfalls. So when his passion got involved, when he got excited about something, he was saying, don't be an idiot, don't do this. It's because he had learned that the hard way and he knew he could help me avoid that. And so I always really appreciated that. And the, little bit of joking, calling you a dumbass or whatever. I don't know. That's what buddies do. I wasn't offended by that.
Like, we live in a society that I think, like, the new generation kind of gets bothered by that kind of back and forth banter and an attitude towards the younger generation. But you're saying that it was something that you're comfortable with.
Right.
So I guess I'm just curious why we got to where we are with it in that aspect. But anyways, that doesn't matter. I'm kind of curious, what's the difference between the mentorship and then reading on your own, and what value does one give versus the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of general knowledge you can get from reading books, watching educational content, taking a course, whatever. And that can be great. You can get a lot out of that. But when someone actually knows you, knows your personality type, knows your pitfalls, knows what, the mistakes that you can be prone to make, knows your history, knows your goals, what you want to do. It's just such a more personal way to go about things. And so I think, the fact, if you can look up to someone who's ahead of you and has already faced the challenges that you're going to be facing or are currently dealing with, it's just not comparable to reading some guy who's never seen you. It's like, you could apply this to, let's say you're watching church online from some mega church that you've never been to. Pastor doesn't know you. None of the elders know you. It's just not the same. It's not comparable.
Did you pay him?
At one point, I did a little bit years in. I think I gave him a few grand at one point, just as a thank you, essentially.
Yeah.
Because I got a ton of value out of it, and I still screwed up a lot, but I did skip a lot of steps too with his input.
He never asked for anything.
No.
Why do you think he done it?
I think, he told me actually a little bit before he died, that he just saw himself in me at a young age, and he wanted to see what he could achieve, and putting his knowledge into me, and just seeing how much faster I could build than he did if I can skip the pitfalls. And so I thought it was just kind of a fun little project for him.
It's obviously living in a mindset of abundance for him to do that, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Totally. Oh, and I'd say, you've done the same in a lot of ways. Like, I don't know, why do you hang out with me and Evan and whoever?
Yeah, I actually align myself with younger guys a lot of times. A lot of people have conditioned themselves and have found their rut.
Right.
I consider a lot of people live in a state of being stuck.
Yep.
And a lot of people have made choices, mental and emotional choices, that lead them to a spot where they don't grow anymore.
Yeah.
And so I naturally just adapt and draw to people that are always growing. Right.
Right.
And I think that is also tends to be a youthful behavior trait. And I love youth for that. Right. Why they're always asking questions, why they're seeking, why they're looking, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people lose that. Right.
That's very common.
In
That's
so many ways. Many ways. They know, or they don't care to know anymore, or they got in a position that they just don't care.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's so true.
When you go out into the marketplace and you're looking for a woman, what is the things that you now look for that you maybe didn't look for before? And what was it different?
That's a great question. I mean, I would say sort of the water that we swim in our modern culture teaches you that you're looking for a equal partner that, maybe they have a similar career path as you, a woman that's just as ambitious as you, that's, pretty much just your friend, your buddy that you're going to marry, and you guys are all the same in every way, and you're just going to team up and you're going to relate on every topic, and that's going to be great. I think that is a hoax, and historically that has not been the case at all. There are very distinct roles that men are made. There's a great saying from one of my favorite online preachers, Joel Levin. It's not male and female roles he assigned them. It's male and female natures he designed them. So there are ways that men are just made to work, and there are ways that women are designed to function. And our culture has screwed that all up. So to get back to your initial question.
I asked a question on that.
Yeah.
So what does he mean by that?
Okay, this gets a little bit into theology.
That's fine.
But there's something called complementarianism in Christianity. And the idea is essentially that men and women are more or less the same, but God just decided, okay, the man, you're going to be more of the provider and protector. Woman, you're going to be the nurturer and things like that. And, say in the church that only men can preach, women don't preach. But it's sort of arbitrary, and God just, he just decided for no good reason that's what it's going to be. Whereas what I believe is no, God very intentionally gave men and women different natures to be skilled at different things. And when we go outside of that, when a man is, is feminine, when a woman is in her masculine, things just get screwed up.
And why do you think we've chosen to put this new doctrine, so-called new? I think it is fairly new. Why have we chosen, do you think, as a culture to try to blend in our roles?
I think I do think it goes back a long way, actually. I mean, even in the Bible, it talks about how Eve's desire will be for her husband. And it doesn't just mean she's like attracted to her husband. It means she wants to take his position of authority. And so I think it is a very, very old problem that there are obviously modern manifestations of it. But I think it's all through history. The draw is, Nate had a sermon on this. The draw is for women to want to assert their authority, and the draw is for men to want to be passive. So we have to resist. Yeah.
So why would men choose to be passive then?
It's a great question. I mean, obviously it's easier in a lot of ways. If you can just step back, you can avoid conflict.
Right.
You can, it's just the path of least resistance.
Right. And so I agree. And I think it's obviously it comes from a darker place, this ideology. And so we've taught women that they can be independent, have sex as they wish.
Right.
There's not consequences. There's plan A, B, and C, and D. If there's, you have your birth control, you have to after sex pill, whatever is a B pill, plan B or whatever they call it. And then they have abortion and so forth. And so they can be equal to us, right? And not have any consequences in their decision making. And then on and on and on. And so we have basically undermined the value of women, right? In the process of it, because we've ignored their strengths, right? And we said, okay, you're equal to men now. And so now we've diminished their strengths and just basically tried to make their strengths equal to our strengths, which will never exist in the first place. They can never be equal to us. Neither can we be equal to a woman. Right. And so no, I totally agree. So because of that, is the journey more of a challenge because of that?
Yes.
Like, what does that look like when
Yeah.
you go out to the field and you're dating?
Right.
Or what does that look like?
So back to your original question, I would say initially, you know, as a kid, and I was very shy as a teenager. There was no game involved. I was scared of girls, basically, right? So when I was,
Do you have any sisters?
No. When I was probably about 18, I started listening to a lot of online content, listening to some pickup stuff,
artists,
whatever. Yeah.
I
And
love
so
that.
I kind of got into that, and I started going out all the time, and
Yeah.
and I think I did learn a lot from that. I think
Sure.
there was a lot of good from just, you know, getting over your fear of approaching, and just you see a beautiful girl and you're like, all right, I have to go talk to her or else I'm going to hate myself for the next week. And so just forcing myself to do that, I think there's a lot of good in that. But the problem with that whole community, pretty much all of them are degenerates. I'm a Christian man. I'm looking for a wife. I want to have a family. So they're up to no good in that sense. But that's a little bit off track. To your initial question, I would say initially I was looking for, you know, just a friend that I'd get along with, and, you know, oh, maybe she's a businesswoman and she's really ambitious and she thinks like me, and we have all these same interests and all these same hobbies and all this. I don't care about any of that crap. I want a nice, feminine, godly woman who's going to help me in my mission. And sure, of course, she's going to have her own interests and things, but we don't have to get along on every, you know, interest, and we don't have to like the same music and the same movies. And none of that matters. It's the core values.
Yeah, but you said you try to find that friend that you could have that conversation and get to know and turn out to something maybe better.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work.
So what happened there?
Oh yeah, we've all been friend zoned. No, that is the worst strategy. And you know what? I'm not to throw my dad under the bus, but his advice was always, he's like, you know how I met your mom? We were just friends and we were working in the church together, and it's just gonna happen for you. And I think a lot of the advice that older guys give may have worked back in the day, but times have changed.
Very different
times
culture out
have
there.
changed.
Yeah. My question is that amongst the church-going girls, what's the difference? What are you looking for, and how are they different, I guess, than the girls from the club? And is a lot of things the same, and what's different in the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a shame to admit, but I think the cultures influence the church more than the churches influence the culture, and it really should be the other way. But truth is, and that's not just for women, that's for us too, right? But all that to say, you can't think in 2024 that, you know, you meet some girl at church and she wasn't out the night before. Who's to say, right? Who's to say? So, no, absolutely. I 100% believe there are good, godly women in the church. And if you're not looking in church, where else are you going to find them, by the way? So I saw a tweet yesterday, and this guy's like, Christian men are going to have to realize you can't find a wife in church. I'm like, you dumb. Where are you going to look? You just walk down the street and you're just going to, you think a good Christian girl's not going to go to church? Like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
Anyway,
all
that to say, the distinction's not quite as clear as I would like it to be some days, but no, the difference is, you know, do you have the Holy Spirit working in your life or not?
Right.
And there are people that show up at church on Sunday, and, you know, or to more or less degrees, some might not even be Christians, some are, but maybe very immature. Sure, that's been me at times, absolutely. But no, there's a range there. So you can't think just because I'm looking in this one place that you're all good to go, and you're not going to find, you know, Proverbs talks about the quarrelsome woman and how you should never marry her, and if you do, your life's going to be horrible. And there's all kinds of warnings in Scripture for sure.
I always kind of wondered, you know, men that have got their crap together, figured things out, understood life, all that kind of stuff, sometimes struggle to find the wife that actually will support them at a level they need to be supported at, and have enough wisdom and understanding to meet all your needs.
Right.
So what's your take on that? Is the idea of having maybe two wives or so forth a thing that's, you know, why is that no longer accepted, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, so on that one, I would say, obviously, from the pragmatic side of things, I get the appeal. I see the argument, for sure. But, okay, there's something called biblicism, which is where, you know, you could take any example, but say you have a position, I have a position, we disagree, and you say to me, show me a verse where it says that this is prohibited. You don't have to do that. There are principles you can get throughout the Bible through just general revelation, something called natural law, which is to kind of use your reason, see what works in the world, what doesn't. And all that to say, throughout the Old Testament, yes, Deuteronomy talks about kings don't have to, but you're right, it could be debated. However, every example of polygamy in the Old Testament pretty much ends bad. It talks about how King Saul, his wives led his heart astray, and that was very condemned.
Was it Saul or Solomon?
Sorry, Solomon. Yes.
Yeah.
Other examples, the first.
He had 1,000 or more though.
He
right?
was running them off. He truly had a roster on the go, to say the least.
Yeah.
But
which was against the law to have many wives.
Yes, and I don't even remember.
But I know there was a lot of struggles in different relationships that in Old Testament in general.
Yeah.
Even when they only had 2.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, no, my argument for monogamy would be more of one from principle in that, okay, Christ has one bride, and that is the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the picture of marriage points to that. And so set aside all the, in the New Testament, different passages that seem to imply that it's just assumed that you would have one wife. I will grant you the point. It's not always super, super clear cut that it's condemned to have more. But I think the overall principles, you look at how bad it went for everybody in the Old Testament. You look to the fact that Christ has one bride. He's our example. And beyond that, I think something Protestants, we do a lot is we just don't care about church history at all. We're just like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's just me and my Bible reading, and I'm just going to come up with whatever it says in here, and that's it. No, I think we need to put a little more weight on what the church fathers have said, what just thousands and thousands and thousands, millions of Christians have believed through history. And ever since the time of Christ, since the first century, the church has been pretty hardcore on monogamy. In addition to that, just the fact that I don't think you're going to get away with it in this day and age, or find a good Christian girl, multiple, that are going to be down with that. For those reasons, I'm out. But obviously, I can see the appeal.
Right. I always heard it said before. One other person told me that you have a lot more challenges with 2 wives.
I would think double. I would at least.
But I always say back that I'd also have multiple problems if I had more than one field or more than one house.
I'll give you that. Yeah.
And I like more than one field. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, but no, I was just curious. Another topic: women voting.
Okay, this is one I haven't looked into a lot.
Uh-huh.
I will say though, if women didn't vote, a Democrat would have never won a single election in the U.S. So that's one thing. Beyond that, I think the traditional idea was that the man votes for the household, and it's not that he's, suppressing his wife's beliefs or anything like that. In the ideal circumstance, they're going to be on the same page. They're going to be in agreement, and he casts the vote for the family. Beyond that, there also used to be laws about you had to be, I think, a landowner, and you had to have some real investment. You couldn't just be an Indian that showed up yesterday and all of a sudden, your vote is just as good as someone who's been here for generations. You had to be invested in the place and have some real stake here. So that's another thing. And beyond that too, the idea of a husband and wife voting against each other. I don't know. Did you see that Democrat campaign, whatever, advertisement where it was like the wife was sneakily voting Democrat while the husband was voting Republican? Yeah. That is just messed up. Like, what kind of marriage is that?
You've had a lot of success at a young age. A lot of failures, a lot of success.
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel like today, the level of showing up that you're doing currently, if you were to rank it 0 to 10, where do you feel like you are in your life?
In all categories, or
on average? In all categories.
On average, I'm going to give it a 7.5.
And how frustrated are you on a daily basis that you aren't showing up enough at this point in time?
Not very. No, not very. Because I think I'm at peace with the season of life that I'm in. And right now, I need to mostly focus on just grinding it out. In a lot of the day-to-day work, I do enjoy it, but sort of a boring position as far as, this year, we're not adding any equipment. We're not really expanding aggressively. And so I'm kind of just doing the same thing I did last year. I'm okay with that because I know it's the position I need to be in to get to where I want to be next year. And it's going to financially put me in a position where then we can grow again. And so, no, I'm totally at peace on that front. And personally too, I don't know. I'm out here. I'm dating. I'm trying.
Yeah.
You can't. What do you want? Like, I would like to be married. I would like to start having kids, but can't force that, and that's all in God's timing. So, yeah. Fitness. I should probably prioritize the gym a little more again. That would be good.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, no, I'm pretty content.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think that so many in your generation have decided not to show?
You know, I don't want to play the blame game and the victim game, but I think the sort of boomer mindset is that, you know, these kids nowadays, they don't have any work ethic, and, you know, they're just a bunch of bums and they're playing video games. And there is a lot of that. Don't get me wrong. There is a lot of that. But I don't know. I know a lot of hardworking young guys that are out here trying, and in a lot of ways, things are just more difficult. You know, pretty hard to buy a house in this country, and that can be discouraging, I think. And so I would say that's it's definitely harder to buy a house. It's probably harder to find a wife. There are a variety of things that previous generations took for granted that I think can easily discourage young men. And so that's not an excuse to give up. That's not. It's actually a reason to try way harder. But I do sympathize to some degree that it can be a challenge for sure.
Right. That's interesting because the system was set up before, maybe in place, that everything would fall into place. Right? You done this, you got your house, you done this, you got your wife, you done the system, you done the process, and you got the results. Right? And that's kind of how it was set up, especially in, you know, our parents' time frame. So now that we are where we are and we're struggling more, and I totally agree. Like the landscape for, you know, buying your house, finding your wife and that kind of stuff has become much more difficult. Right. But I believe also there's been so many more resources.
That's very true.
That they didn't have. Yeah. And also to have a bigger house than they had and have a better relationship than they had and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So what would you tell the young guys that are struggling? They're looking for, you know, hey, I'm struggling. I'm not getting the results. I'm getting friend zoned all the time. Not saving any money, all that kind of stuff. Where do they go? What do they do?
That's a great question, because I think there's a lot of bad content out there that can lead you astray very, very quickly. I think a lot of guys have turned to that. And so, not to say that there isn't good advice on the internet, there absolutely is, but I would say that should not be primary. I mean, ideally, if you've got a good father in your life that can guide you along.
And if you don't,
you know what? That's never been me. And so I don't know. I would probably suggest finding a mentor. I think it's essential to have that figure, and I can empathize with that position. But I've never. My dad's amazing, so I don't know. I can't really speak on it too much. But even with that being said, even if you do have, you know, that good father figure, that mentor in place, I don't quite know how to word this, but some of their advice you do have to take with a grain of salt. Yeah. Just not because they don't have your best intentions in mind, but just understanding that their life experience was different than yours. They had different challenges in their day. Some things were easier for them, some things were harder for them, whatever. But you can't take it as a one-to-one, everything they say, and just apply it. So you do have to have some discernment there. And that's the tricky part. How do you kind of take that age-old advice into our day and apply it properly? That's a trick, and that's something you got to work through. You're not going to get a simple answer on that.
Yeah, no, I've seen multiple times with even my own father when it comes to relationship stuff. He gives these advices, these points of references, which not particularly excited about having a relationship like my father has.
Right.
And he gives his advice, and I look at him like, only half truth. Right? Yep. There's a lot of half truths in people's advice over and over again. So what's different? You've obviously, I think one of the things that I'm noticing is that you've applied and you've practiced. So you took the information, you went into a practice, see if it was true, brought it back in, and then understood it and related with it.
Yeah, that's the only way. I mean, I would say above everything, it's just taking action and just doing something.
Right.
Not pontificating, not studying, just try.
Mm.
And being able to reframe your failures as a lesson, I think, is so essential. When you see your ups and downs as just part of your story, and you have these big goals, this vision for your life, and you take a massive plummet, you dive off a cliff. I mean, it's not, if you're in your 20s, you're in your 30s, even if you're in your 40s, whatever, you've still got time. This is a Gary Vee point, but you do still have time. Like, there are all kinds of success stories where guys had bankruptcies, divorces, and all these terrible things in their life, and they took the lesson from that and they kept it pushing.
Right.
And so the only way to fail is to quit. Ultimately, it's a cliche, but I do believe that.
Right. So, and all the advice that I've given you over the time, which one do you disagree with?
Wow. I don't know where to go with that. All right, prompt me with something. Nothing's coming to the top of my mind.
So my advice on finances, on dating, on women, those are the main two things that I really focus on.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes I sit down and listen to you when it comes to faith type stuff, to be honest. I'm always learning there.
Sure.
I don't really feel like I'm a genius because I have other people in my life that have, seem to know more information than I do in that area.
Yeah.
But is there stuff that you've practiced with that or maybe that's worked for you? What if I gave you advice that has worked for you?
Yeah, I would say there's been a couple times where, you even mentioned it earlier where you said, as entrepreneurs, we're often so close to the edge of crazy. I think that's absolutely true. And that was very comforting at the time. And every time, it's been multiple times. I remember one night I had to lay off some really good guys, and that was very painful, and that was the first time I had to, I fired people for whatever, but these guys did nothing wrong. It was my screw ups that led to them losing their job. And I don't even remember exactly all what we discussed that night, but you were just like, yeah, man, that's the game. You mentioned some pointers. Hey, you didn't look out for this. You weren't.
I said we're responsible on the day to our business.
Yeah.
Right. That's the one we're responsible to. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if we're the CEO or the next person's CEO. Yeah. You're responsible to it. Right. Irrelevant of that. And you have to show up. Yeah. And take that decision making. And the day that you are not in that role, then you have to take it. Yeah. And as ugly and as it doesn't seem fair or whatever else goes along. Yeah. It's your role and your responsibility. And and I've looked at it that way, that I'm basically a steward to my business. Right. Just like I'd be a steward to anything else I do. Right. Be it to my kids or a relationship or whatever. I'm the one that's going to show up. I'm going to be the one that's responsible for it. And sometimes it's ugly. Yeah. Right? Sometimes it goes against the grain. Sometimes it goes against culture. Right. And you have to make the best decisions that with the information you have. Yeah. And roll with it. Right.
Oh, it's so true. So true.
That's good. Man, I was hoping to have something a little more controversial.
I guess we agree on too much. I don't know. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of content out here. There's all kinds of guys talking about business, finance, everything. Yeah. And you're covering a range of topics, which I think is good. I like that. Keeps things interesting. But all to say, I mean, what do you think you're going to be able to bring to the table here that's not being discussed? What gap in the market are you filling?
I was the guy that was married at 19, divorced at 30, and I had no mentor. Even ask yourself this right now. How many relationships have you seen? Couples, married couples, that you point out and say, I want a relationship like that?
Not that many.
That's the problem. Yeah. And so as men, I have a low emotional IQ. Okay, so I don't naturally become aware of all the nuances of someone's emotions. Right. And so I had to break down basically how we all work together or don't work together. And I simplified it to a point that I can basically help men take the information I have, take the breakdown information that I had, and apply it to their lives. Right. And so you don't have to choose everything I teach, but I got it so simplified at this point in time that you can take that information, apply it to your life, and then come back and say it didn't work or it did work. Right. But I've practiced it enough times in my life to realize it does work. Yeah. Right. And basically, I want to help married men specifically. Now, I think I'll reach to an age group that's much younger that is not married that says, I don't want to screw up when I get married. Right. So anywhere from the age group of men that have a desire to change their life to men that are in the struggle that says, hey, my wife doesn't love me anymore. She's got the ick, you know, and she's turning away. She's no longer interested. I believe 50% of women have emotionally detached themselves to the relationship, right? And they're still in the relationship out of duty, right? I want to change that. I want to change it so the man comes in the house and that she's just waiting for him, right? Just wants to make love with him, and she's so open to him, and that he can have sex whenever he wants. He's not waiting for the right day, right week, right moment, right everything, begging for sex. Because when you show up as a man and you show up the proper way, your needs also get met, right? So when you meet your wife's needs, you automatically will have your needs met, right? And so it's going to be a journey for a lot of men to show up to that level and have the right information to be able to get those results. But at the end of the day, we're all looking for a connection. We're all looking for an amazing connection, right? Amazing connection. We don't want average relationships. We don't want average friend relationships, wife relationships. We don't want average in anything, right? And so that's where the thing is right now in the marketplace. What's happening is we have the Andrew Tates that actually has good content. You know, it's a little obnoxious, some stuff, right? But if you break it all down, there's some good information in there.
Sure, there is. Yeah.
And then
funny stuff too.
Right, there's some crazy stuff and whatever else. But there isn't a step-by-step practice for the married man that's having a struggle and in a relationship that's struggling to how to get results. It's the pickup artist to help the young guys to know how to pick up a girl. But as we've read in books like Tough Times Create Strong Men, that pickup artists, once they have the relationship started, they can't maintain the relationship because they have not actually shown up as men in all the other areas of your life. And so they see that they're a fraud once they start dating and marrying them. Right. But if you are who you are all the way through, then the women will just continue to fall in love with you. Right. And there's a way in which you can show up as a man that's not easy, but that's simple. Right. That will make all the difference in your relationship. So that's kind of where I want to sit in the whole market. And it's not there right now. Like, and if there was if that market was there, I wouldn't even start.
No, it's a great point because who's bringing that gap together? Of yes, you have a Tate-like guy, and sure, he does have some good stuff, some stuff I would definitely disagree with, but he's on this extreme kind of playing into this caricature. Not a Christian, not married. No. So there's there is a gap.
$6 million cars, so you can have the $1 million, you know, whatever. It's all about the money, the flat, the sexy girlfriends.
Let's go deeper into that.
Yeah. If that's actually true, what's the foundation of it?
There is.
Right. And if there is, I want to know it.
Sure.
Right. Is it simple or is it complicated?
Right.
Because what you're teaching me seems pretty complicated.
Right.
Like, give me content that's simple, that me, the average Joe, the blue-collared guy, that I can take that information, apply it in my life, and I can start seeing results. Right. And so that's the market. If the market, it did exist, I would say go follow Joe. Go follow Frank. Like, go follow them. Right. They're good enough. I don't need to go to the marketplace. Right. I just go, he's great. I double share his content. Right. And that's what I would do. Right. And so because of that being missing, because there's not good role models in relationships, right? Because of all of that, I think there's a huge gap, and that's what I'm going after.
Very cool. Very cool.
Well, thanks, Nick. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
I thought it was more controversial than it was, but anyways, it turned out awesome. Anyways, this is Nick Bohner again, and it was great to have you. And if you like this content, like, subscribe. And if you disagree with us, please comment below why you disagree with us. And if there's some other topic you'd like us to touch base on and comment on, comment on it, and we will review it in the future. Thanks a lot.